The wine glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the marble floor. My wife, Vivica, didn't even stop mocking the cheap clothes of the small-town girl my son had just brought home. "This family isn't a charity for girls looking for a shortcut to a rich life," she sneered. I couldn't breathe. My son had just proudly introduced his fiancée, Tamara Upshaw, a last name I hadn't heard since 1999. A name my billionaire family had paid to bury 25 years ago. Looking at Tamara's high cheekbones and gray-green eyes, a terrifying math began locking into place. If I was right, my son wasn't just in love. He was engaged to his own half-sister, and neither of them had any idea. At 55, I had perfected the art of looking defeated. My mother, Constance Prescott, the ruthless 80-year-old matriarch of Prescott Holdings, believed she ruled our $180 million empire alone. I let her believe it. Control was her currency. Information was mine. But my information network failed to warn me about my own son. Days before the disastrous dinner, I had overheard 20-year-old Everett whispering into his phone in the study. "I love her. Mom will never understand. But I don't care about the money." Curiosity turned to dread when I checked his desk later. Sitting on top of his trust paperwork was a handwritten note. "Tamara Upshaw, Columbia Art History." The room tilted. In 1999, I was trapped in an arranged marriage with Vivica, orchestrated by my mother. That was the year I met Noreen Upshaw, a gallery assistant who loved me for who I was, not my portfolio. For 6 months, I lived a double life. Then, Constance found out. She presented me with signed separation papers and bank records proving Noreen had taken a $200,000 settlement to vanish to California. I forced myself to forget her. But looking at the Columbia student directory now, the timeline stripped away all denial. Noreen disappeared in April 1999. Tamara was 20 years old. The coincidences weren't just stacking, they were screaming. The next morning, I bypassed my mother's estate security. The family safe opened with the same code she had used for 40 years. 41,952, the day Prescott Holdings was incorporated. Buried beneath layers of clean deeds and stock certificates, I found an unlabeled manila envelope. Inside was a faded photograph from April 1999. It was me at the Hudson River, my arm around a woman in a blue sundress. But her face had been violently torn away, a ragged oval of missing history. My mother hadn't just paid Noreen to leave, she had kept her filed away like a repossessed asset. "You're in my safe," a cold voice echoed. Constance stood in the doorway, her mourning pearls gleaming. Her sharp, calculating eyes locked onto the torn photo. "Who tore this, Mother?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Ancient history isn't your concern," she said, stepping into the room with clinical detachment. "That museum girl was unsuitable. I solved a problem. Your son's future is what matters now. He will marry someone from our approved list by spring. He's been seen with an art student. No connections, no assets. It ends now, Kenton. Convince him or I will." As the door clicked shut, a chill settled in my chest. Constance wasn't just being controlling, she was terrified. She knew Noreen had been pregnant. She knew an illegitimate Prescott heir existed. And she was racing to bury the truth before Everett found out he was in love with his own flesh and blood. I traced Noreen through old museum archives to a small antique appraisal shop in Cold Spring, New York, operating under a pseudonym. I drove up alone in an unmarked sedan, tracking her like a ghost. At 2:15 p.m., she walked into a local cafe. She wore a simple sweater, her dark hair threaded with gray, carrying herself with the practiced invisibility of someone who spent 25 years hiding. When she saw me sitting in the corner booth, terror flashed across her face. She sat down heavily. "You have no right to be here after 25 years. Did you have my child, Noreen? I never knew you were pregnant. Your mother threatened to destroy me and take the baby if I ever breathed your name," Noreen whispered, her hands shaking. "I took the money to protect my daughter. I raised Tamara alone. She's at Columbia on a full scholarship. She has no idea who her father is. Noreen, she's dating Everett, my son. They're in love." The color completely drained from her face. No, God, no. Before we could speak, the cafe door chimed. A young woman in a Columbia sweatshirt walked in, heading straight for our booth. Mom, I grabbed lunch before heading back to campus. Tamara stopped, smiling politely at me. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. She had the high Prescott cheekbones, the distinctive arch of the eyebrows, and the gray-green eyes that looked back at me from my son's face every morning. She ordered a coffee, waved goodbye, and left, completely unaware she had just smiled at her biological father. I needed weapons, not theories. I hired Dean Wolfe, an elite forensic investigator specializing in corporate and bloodline warfare. Within 12 hours, Dean called me back to his office, pointing at a whiteboard timeline that turned my blood to ice. Your mother didn't just pay her off, Kenton, Dean said. Look at the aggregated police reports. A break-in in 2001, a near-miss hit-and-run in 2006, a suspicious apartment fire in 2012, brakes tampered with in 2023. Someone has been trying to kill Noreen Upshaw for a quarter of a century. My mother, I whispered. Yes, but every single attempt failed because a highly trained operative intervened and saved her every time. Someone else has been running a shadow protection detail on Noreen since 1999. Dean pulled up the financial records. Constance had a contract with Meridian Strategic Solutions, a shadow agency specializing in threat elimination. She had kept a hitman on a $100,000 annual retainer for 25 years, but the final entry made my heart stop. December 6, 2024. Activation bonus, $500,000. Escrow release, $11.5 million upon verified termination. The timeline was short. The hitman, Operative 47B, had already been activated. His designated target zone, Columbia University. Meanwhile, the social warfare had already begun. Vivica, thinking she was merely protecting Everett from a lower-class opportunist, launched a vicious cyberbullying and isolation campaign at Columbia. Tamara was blacklisted from study groups and publicly humiliated in Butler Library by wealthy students. When Everett stepped in to defend her, Constance summoned him to her private study. I watched through hidden surveillance cameras I'd covertly installed years ago. The London School of Economics, Constance said, sliding a brochure across her desk. A prestigious 3-year placement. You leave January 10th. End this ridiculous fling with the Upshaw girl. Or I freeze your trust fund, weaponize our connections, and ensure she is publicly expelled under fabricated charges of academic fraud. Everett looked like he was aging in real time. The trap was flawless. Defy them and watch the girl he loved be utterly ruined or leave for London to save her. If I sign, Everett choked out, his voice hollow, you leave her alone. Completely. You have my word, Constance smiled. Everett signed the study abroad agreement and walked out, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The moment the door shut, Constance turned to Vivica with a sickening grin. The boy is handled. Now activate the permanent solution. I want the Upshaw girl gone before he leaves for London. No failures this time. The next day, I scheduled an emergency meeting at our Westchester Trust office. I walked in projecting total defeat, carrying folders of hastily arranged papers. Constance and Vivica arrived like queens ready to claim territory, demanding full, irrevocable control of the entire $180 million estate. I'm tired of fighting, I lied, letting my shoulders slump. You win. They greedily signed the restructuring paperwork, but they didn't look closely at the fine print. I had embedded an airtight execution of Section 12, Subsection 4, the morality clause, a mechanism built by my grandfather, stating that if any trustee is linked to domestic violence or a conspiracy to harm family members, all assets are frozen instantly. I calmly shut my briefcase. Before we finalize this, let me introduce my backup network. I slid my tablet across the table. It played the crystal-clear audio and video of them, planning Tamara's murder in the study, followed by the financial wire trail, tracing the $12 million from Vivica's art gallery, accounts straight to Meridian Strategic Solutions. You hired a professional killer to murder my daughter, I said, leaning in. Yes, Tamara is my child, and you did it using family funds. Vivica gasped, her face turning pale. Constance's hands shook, but her gaze remained venomous. This is blackmail. No, Mother, this is checkmate. Call off the asset at Columbia, or watch federal prosecutors dismantle what's left of your lives. But Constance was a cornered predator. Instead of calling off the hit, she drove straight to Columbia campus to finish it herself. Dean's surveillance units tracked her approaching Tamara outside the library. Through a hidden audio feed, I listened to my 80-year-old mother corner my daughter in a quiet alcove. Young women face many dangers in this city, Miss Upshaw. Constance's voice was smooth as ice. A fall from a dorm window, an accidental drowning, a mugging gone wrong. Walk away from Everett, or you'll discover exactly how fatal Manhattan can be for girls who overreach. Tamara's voice trembled, but she stood her ground. I'm not afraid of you. What Constance didn't know was that Tamara was recording the entire exchange on her phone. And Dean's tactical teams had captured the felony threat from 3 distinct angles. Minutes later, my phone rang. It was Tamara, her voice shaking. A woman just threatened to kill me. She said she's Everett's grandmother. I know, sweetheart, I heard everything. Send me the recording and stay exactly where you are. You're safe now. That midnight, Dean met me in my private study with tactical maps. The killer is still floating on campus, Kenton. We need a definitive trap to pull him out. We already have one, I replied. I opened the study door and knocked twice. A tall, athletic man in dark tactical gear stepped into the light. Dean, meet Harlan Jennings, I said, the mysterious shadow detail. I hired him 25 years ago, the exact week Noreen disappeared. I couldn't stop my mother openly back then, but I made sure Noreen survived every single thing Constance threw her way. Harlan gave a curt nod. 5 successful interventions. The contract hitman is staging an ambush at the estate's formal signing ceremony tomorrow night. He thinks the girl is an easy target during the crowd chaos. Then we end this tomorrow, Dean said. The trap sprung with perfect surgical precision. During the crowded estate event, 2 operatives disguised as catering staff broke toward Tamara with a sedative syringe. Before they could even reach her, Harlan neutralized them both in seconds, pinning the lead assassin to the marble floor. I instantly executed the data link to the FBI and the trust bank. Within 90 seconds, the $180 million Prescott fortune was frozen. Sirens wailed outside as federal units stormed the estate. Vivica was reduced to tears, her makeup running, while handcuffs clicked around my mother's wrists. You orchestrated this, Constance spat as they led her away. You betrayed your own blood. I saved my children from a monster, I said. We are not the same. The fallout was absolute. Facing a RICO template and decades of documented crimes unearthed by my Uncle Edmund, Vivica traded her loyalty for leniency, taking a plea deal of 8 to 12 years. Constance suffered a massive stroke in custody, trading her empire for a heavily guarded bed at Bellevue Hospital. 2 days later, the true healing began. We met in a neutral downtown conference room, me, Noreen, Harlan, Everett, and Tamara. Taking a deep breath, I delivered the final, painful truth. Everett, Tamara, you share my DNA. You are half-siblings. The bond you felt wasn't a romance, it was biology calling out to itself. And heavy silence blanketed the room. Everett looked devastated, but Tamara gently reached across the table, her hand resting on his arm. They had instinctively kept boundaries during their relationship, never crossing lines they couldn't come back from. Some deep, subconscious part of them had protected the family timeline. Harlan stood beside Tamara. I've been her dad for 20 years, he told me firmly. Biology doesn't threaten that. I know, I smiled through tears. You earned the title I lost. Yesterday, I met Tamara one last time in the now-empty Prescott boardroom. I handed her a private, irrevocable educational trust. No corporate ties, no public strings. Just an honest acknowledgement of 20 years of child support. She signed the papers with a small, pragmatic smile that mirrored my own. I'm applying to Columbia Law for the fall, she said. I want to change the system from the inside. I watched her walk down the corridor, her steps confident, heading toward a future built entirely on her own merit. Behind me, the brass nameplate of Constance Prescott had already been stripped from the wall, leaving nothing but an empty square. My mother's legacy was fear and control. Mine would be truth. And in that simple difference, our family was finally free.